All right, this is my Tiger Tech video for how to create a differentiated blended lesson. So I've broken this down into about 4 steps, and the first step obviously would be to gather the data. So you gave a quiz, some kind of thing. I highly suggest using Linkit or some other technology program to do this because it makes collecting that formative data much easier. So you collect it, you're analyzing it. With that formative quiz, when you're setting it up, I really like to target my questions to specific standards or DOK levels, and Linkit will let you tag them. So even if you can't do the official Missouri standards, you can tag it whatever you want. So if I'm like, I want them to be able to think at this high DOK level by the end of this, I might have DOK 1 questions 2 and 3, or if I'm looking at multiple standards, I will tag each one as what standard it is targeting. And I try to make my questions only target one standard or one DOK level, obviously, to make that data easier to analyze. That way, if a student misses that question, or hopefully those questions, then they need to be in a certain group, and it makes it really clear. So the step 2 is to analyze that data and group your students. You can group them however you want. I usually just use random colors, and I change the colors all the time. So I'll have like purple, orange, blue, and green, and then the next time it'll be totally different colors. Or my supposed like low group or whatever, because sometimes they can figure it out. I'll change that color up so they don't really know. Step 3 would be to create a plan for each group. Some questions to really consider: do you want every group on a computer? Do you want to do any small groups? Like, are they going to come see you at all? Will groups work together, or are they just going to be near each other? I think that you can easily work in Kagan with blended learning. I talked about that in that other presentation. And we know that kids learn best usually when they're working together, but you decide. And then, are the groups going to rotate? Are they going to do multiple stations, or are they just going to do the one? Those are all questions that you might need to think about. Step 4, now you have to create your content. This is a video for how to make a video. If you need a refresher or you didn't see the last presentation I gave. So it's kind of hard to visualize, but here's an example from my class. This would be a social studies example. My green group was my group that missed kind of those DOK 1 questions. So they're doing a fan and pick over Native Americans. So they don't even have the computers in front of them. They are working together to label the regions, understand the geography of them, whatever, doing a fan and pick that I just made. And some classes, every single person in the class was in this group to begin with. But then for me, I decided as they mastered something, and they had to show me they mastered it by taking a quiz that was just that DOK 1. As they mastered it, they would go on to another thing that they missed. Or if they didn't miss anything else, they would go on to my red group, which was my extended learning group. My yellow group did a Zaption with a CSI, so this was using the computer, and it was really self-paced. And they're doing a color symbol image from Making Thinking Visible, which if you don't know that book, I highly suggest you looking it up. The CSI is my favorite one from there. My blue group did a Zaption also, but with a focus on citing evidence and race, because they had missed the race response, and I specifically graded for citing evidence that time. So they're doing like a refresher on that. And then my red group is, if they've mastered everything else, they get to do this. And they got to research current events, which they always love to do. And they specifically had to find ones that related to Native Americans, and then write a blog post about how ancient Native cultures still related to the world today. And, you know, they like if they get to write on their blog. So I try to make my extended one interesting and something they would want to do, because they worked hard to master all the other material. So while all my groups are doing those things, I'm free to observe students and pull those who I'm like, they just need me one-on-one. Like, I have some students who, yeah, they could sit in a fan and pick, and they might learn a little bit, but they really just need me to totally reteach, and I'll pull small groups for that if I need to. And obviously each hour is different. So I had some hours where I had no green groups. Yeah. Here's a math example from Crystal. I'm just going to let you read that because I don't really know what I would add to it. But this is Crystal Brown's 7th grade math. So she is doing things where she pulls students and also incorporating Zaption with Kagan, and then research as well for her extended group. And her extended group was her green group. A few tips, because ideally we would give a quiz and then the next day we would have this formative activity, and I like to do that, but I also know like that would take, I wouldn't have any time at home for me. So I plan ahead. Obviously, I'm not going to know my groups until they take that quiz. But if I know my questions and how I'm laying them out, I can create an activity that if they miss this group of questions, they need to do that activity for every single possibility that they would miss, right? So like those 4 groups, I made that way ahead of even giving this quiz. And I have never had this happen, but sometimes I'll have maybe 5 of my 140 who get to do that extended activity because people needed to do relearning, right? Sometimes I have a bunch doing extended and a few of them doing relearning. Either way, it's beneficial. I really like to create those action questions to reinforce the concepts missed from the original formative. So when they're watching that video, I will throw in a breakdown of those questions that they took that quiz on. So maybe I'll ask smaller questions to get them to that point where they could ultimately answer that question on a quiz again. Zaption is a formative, so as they're working, you can check that and conference and pull in small groups if you need to. And don't forget Kagan. It's a little bit more chaotic, and we have to give up a little bit more control when our students are already grouped and they're doing different things in each group. And then you throw in at different points, different pairs are going to do different Kagan activities because remember, they're moving at their own pace. But it really is great. It's chaotic at first, but once you kind of get the expectation to them and the habit of active learning, it's great.